So look, if we had the money right now, we'd be playing Jimi Hendrix's Experience, the song Are You Experience, to really kind of reinforce the idea that we were talking about candidate experience. We don't have that kind of money. So in your own head, mentally play that wah-wah pedal, buddy. Just go nuts on that thing. You're at Electric Ladyland, rocking out with the boys, and you play that solo. So that's really how we're going to start this off, if you can believe it. Yes, it's true. Mental air guitar. Who would ever thought? Today we're talking about candidate experience, the thing you think you care about, but you don't always know if you're doing it right, because it's such a weird, vague, open kind of concept. And much like employer branding, it's the sort of thing we've been sold in a very particular way that may not be the right way. So today we're going to get into candidate experience.
At a time when candidates can apply to every job under the sun with just a click, we need to work extra hard to be remembered. So in this episode, the boys put on their white gloves, get out their silver platters, and talk about getting more out of your candidate experience. It's the People MBA. Brought to you by Plum. Let's see who called in. You've reached the People MBA. We're out shopping for our new global headquarters, so go ahead and talk after the beep.
Hey, Brian and James. It feels like everyone was talking about candidate experience a few years ago, and no one is. Is CX dead?
All right, Brian, today we're going to get into candidate experience. This whole episode is brought to you by Plum, plum.io. Check them out. We thank them for their sponsorship. This is their second, so we're really thrilled that they can be a part of our launch process here at People MBA. A couple of other things. Make sure to leave a voicemail. Make sure to go check us out on YouTube, and as the kids say, smash that subscribe button. That's what they say, I'm told. I wouldn't know. No one's confused me as for a kid in a very long time. But go check that out. That's where the videos are. Go get the downloads at People MBA. All that good stuff still available, always available. Go check it out. And don't forget, all the other downloads we've created over these last couple of months are there. Everything from personal brand to better emails to how to sell your leadership on employer brand. It's all there, helping you turn good thinking into action. So today, Brian, I'm going to call you out for just a second. First off, as the owner and CEO, I don't know what the heck it is you do over there, but as owner of Happy Dance, for a while, your company's tagline was the CXiest career sites. And I just want to let you, I know it's not the case anymore. It's not the tagline anymore, but just chef's kiss. That's a gorgeous tag. I have always loved that stupid tag.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, here we're here to praise that which deserves praise. So I respect the thinking you've done about candidate experience, and I am thrilled that we get to talk about it today.
Cool. Yeah, looking forward to jumping in.
Yeah. So as I said, the download is over at People MBA, sponsored by Plum, plum.io. Thanks so much. Let's start with the basics, because much like employer brand, candidate experience is something that everybody thinks they know, but they may not know. So let's start with some myths about what candidate experience is, what it's for, how it works, things we're all kind of doing wrong.
So, I mean, it's such a big topic, James. You know this yourself, but I think the first thing that I'd start any conversation around candidate experience, if we're starting from the ground up, is the candidate doesn't see it as candidate experience. They see it as brand experience. And a lot of the time, and we've proven this, I remember working with Virgin more than a decade ago, we've proved the economics of this. A poor candidate experience can cost you dearly, not just in the world of talent, but, reputation as a whole. And, we've seen cases where poor candidate experience leads to cancelling tangible consumer contracts and loss in sales revenue and all of those things. So it's not to be taken for granted or dismissed or overlooked. But then the flip side of this is, think about how many companies receive applicants of over 1 million a year. Like, there is so many companies, and not all global brands, a lot of small companies growing, taking on a lot of roles, all the rest of it.
And the number's always increasing because it's just so easy to apply now with all the tools out there. I think that's going to be a surprisingly, terrifyingly common occurrence.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get into this as well, but making a candidate experience easier isn't always equating to positivity and better and more efficient and more effective. So, taking this seriously and also looking at the opportunity of when you get this right, you have a brand ambassador, they might have come through the recruitment door, but actually they leave saying good things about you. And that equates to potentially more customers, a better reputation, more sentiment, market share, and all of those wonderful things. So the opportunities are boundless now, as long as you're getting the basics right. You start with do no harm, and you're serving the candidate in a way that leaves them feeling good about the experience and doesn't damage your reputation.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you just look at some back of the napkin math here, for every candidate you hire, let's just pretend you have 100 applicants. And let's be fair, these days, that's a fairly low number. If you screen 20 of them and talk to and bring in 5 to 10 of them, that means there is a 10x number of people who are having deep, involved interactions with your brand who you never hire, right? You think about, I'm going to make advocates. You always look internally, but there's literally 10 times plus more people who have had deep experiences with your brand who you could be leveraging. And if you don't get your candidate experience, your brand experience right, they're just going to talk smack about you and in a lot of ways kind of undercut any of the good work you're doing internally. I think we're so hyper focused on the hire that we forget about all the other stuff we're leaving behind. And it's just the numbers alone. And like I said, the more people who apply, the more this just gets worse.
So over the years as well, working with lots of organizations who see the value in employee referrals, when we've done our research to discover why aren't referrals, why are they going down, or why are the number of referrals not where we want it to be? One of the top 3 reasons was employees were a little bit ashamed of their own candidate experience and don't want to put their friends through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're using their own their own personal capital to say, I'm referring this person. And it's a two-way street. They're referring the person, but they're also referring the person to the company. And so if the person sucks, that looks bad on them. And if the company sucks, that looks bad on them. And it's a no-win situation very often. So when you have that kind of situation, any tiny little kind of like kink in the gears shuts the whole machinery down. And that, I think referrals is a great kind of litmus test as to, do you have a problem here? Because nobody knows your company and your canned experience like an employee because they've been through both. They know what's really like. And we're, in a lot of ways, we're talking about the basics. We're talking about don't ghost. And I know everybody in the sound of my voice saying we don't ghost. Yes, you do. You do. And do not rely on your ATS to do all the heavy lifting of communicating to people for you. Because if I poll companies, 99% of them will say we absolutely do not ghost. And if I talk to candidates, 99% of them will say they absolutely do. So you tell me what ghosting is. So and that's just kind of a single idea, right? There's so many different ways you can screw this up. I've been through experiences where a friend has recommended me. I started to go through the process and they just forgot about me. And I had to ping my friend and say what was up. And it irreparably damaged the relationship with that person and that company. So it's real.
Yeah, which is why people are hesitant to refer their friends and their community if they don't have faith in the candidate experience, which, goes to show just getting the basics right is, obviously the best place to start. But, that means you need to understand, okay, what does success look like? What is an acceptable level of experience that we're going for here across the board? What are the service level agreements, the basic agreements we need to put in place with each baton holder along the way? Because the truth is now, James, you alluded to it earlier, there are so many tools. The problem isn't technology and tools, and there is a litany. There is, literally, and in some cases, a race to the bottom where the technology isn't expensive anymore. So there's no excuse whatsoever to not have the right tools, but it's never the tools, it's how you use the tools. And usually it's human error or a lack of education or
that
a lack of
design.
Yeah, or things not synchronizing and stitching together and so on and so forth. So, the first sort of piece of advice that I think we need to put out there is, when's the last time you applied for a job in your own organization so you felt firsthand what it was like to be a candidate? And you can, highly recommend getting some alignment internally. Okay, what's acceptable? Where are we now? Measure the sentiment, the NPS, and get some idea of, just how bad is it? I'm going to call it for what it is. Usually it's just how bad is it? There's a lot of organizations doing it well, don't get me wrong. But unless you're measuring it, it's probably not something you're going to be proud of when you sort of look under all the rocks. So, define success. What are you willing to accept in terms of minimal viable level of experience? And then start to map out every branded touch point to discover. And the basic premise when you're doing this, James, and stop me if I'm jumping ahead here, pal. I get excited about this and dive into the meat,
We'll get to it.
If end to end, if you only do this thing, if you only map what people, how people feel, what they are thinking, how easy is it, and what's the memorable moment, like what's the memory they take away from each touch point. If you just map the reality of that and then overlay what you would like it to be with a simple way of getting there, you've just leveled up beyond most organizations on the planet.
Yeah, totally.
And I guarantee, maybe not at every point, but I guarantee there will be points along the way where they are so easy to do. It's littered with quick wins. It's remarkable how easy it is to uplift a candidate experience if you only do that one exercise.
I'd add on, just because I've seen enough of the sausage being made, so to speak, that next to each touch point, there should be potential failures. Let's just use the ATS because it's fun to beat up on an ATS. Everybody loves to do it. Everybody assumes that, okay, well, I've got this ATS and has an automated email, rejection system. I'm blanking on what's the word they use. Doesn't matter. It's such a euphemism for rejecting people. Someone's going to call in and tell me what the answer is. And it's going to be, of course it is. But they just rely on the ATS to do it. But no one says, what's the message? What's the likelihood that those messages goes to spam or just drops off altogether? Is there any way of making sure that those emails are going to where they need to go? So looking at each step and saying, where are the potential failure points? Because we're so... And this is a human thing, not a TA HR thing. We're so assuming the right kind of path that we don't look at the opportunities for failure. What happens when we reach out for a scheduling and nothing happens? Does someone know to go back and circle back and say, hey, we're trying to schedule. Did you not get our email? Are you not getting our emails? There's so many little tiny fail points that if we just say, you're right. If we just say, what do we want people to feel and what's it going to take to get people to feel at each of these stages? That's a huge step up. But I would also say, double check your math in terms of where those failure points are, because it's so easy for good work to go nowhere because it's literally not going to where it needs to go. It's not going to the candidate.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that just goes to sort of reinforce the point of, monthly, quarterly, apply for a job at your organization and just see how it feels. Candidate experience isn't just about a positive brand experience for the candidate when the brand is in front of them, because there's moments of contemplation, there's moments of fear, doubt, anxiety, the night before an interview, there's all sorts.
Absolutely. It's endemic to this process. There's no way to get around that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can have two great candidate branded touch points, but if they are too far apart, the anxiety goes, so it's not just the touch points, it's the cadence and how it feels in between. And that can be impacted by A, shortening the gap. B, setting expectations. If it is going to be 2 weeks, tell them it's going to be 2 weeks and there's nothing you need to do in between.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is maybe there is a moment of magic in between, unexpected value, unexpected time, which creates something that heightens desire, heightens confidence, or gets them to lean in and be really compelled and turn up even more prepared, or the buy-in increases as they go through. There's all sorts of ways to add value and change the experience based on what matters most to you as an organization, if you've got the basics right. There's no point surprising somebody with a moment of magic, but actually they've just been at their wit's end because they can't get a simple answer to a simple question.
Yeah, a 3-star restaurant where the bathroom's not clean is no longer a 3-star restaurant.
There you go.
I don't care how good the food is. It's just that simple. We're going to get into a 7-step process. We're going to skim past it because it's on a downloadable document. Hey, Segue Captain, how are you? Welcome to the Toledo Deck. Check out the download. Thank you, Plum, for sponsoring it. It is over at peoplemba.com. The entire process, as well as a lot of kind of like beyond the basics work, is there for you to kind of check out. And before we get to that, Brian, I have one question. Where do we stand on the phrase white glove? Is that like 5 years ago? That was just the term everybody used. Everybody wanted a white glove, canned experience, white glove, this, white glove, that. One, is everybody still asking for that? Is that still kind of like the assumption of our North Star? And two, is that right?
So, I mean, I think it comes down to how you define white glove. If it's a standard of quality, and a minimum bar for how you're making people feel and what their takeaway and perception is of your brand, then maybe. But actually, high touch isn't always best for your brand, and it's certainly not always best for the candidate. I mean, the Englishman in me comes to America and walks into a retail store and just hates the fact that I can't move without being asked if somebody can help me find something and all the rest of it. It's like, oh my God, like it's just...
I just got here.
Yeah, it's just an awful experience, especially for an Englishman in New York, you know? It's like, it just doesn't work.
We're not going to play the Sting song. We're not going to play the Sting song. If we couldn't afford the Jimmy rights, we're not going to afford
That's right.
Mr. Sumner's rights on that one. Yeah, I just dropped his real name. Fine, I'm a fanboy. Shush. Moving on. Yes.
There you go. However, if I go to a restaurant and it's a special occasion and I've decided to spend a lot of money and I'm trying to impress somebody or create a beautiful, memorable event, then actually I want that level of service and it, you know, adds to the experience. You know, and again, you know, with technology and what's available to us now, it's about understanding with real insight what's best for the candidates, balanced with what's best for the business and the stakeholders. You know, and a lot of people want a human experience, but sometimes they're the human and they don't need another one.
Yeah.
You know, like if I'm on Amazon and I just want next day delivery and all the rest of it, like a human would just mess things up at that point. I want quick, efficient, and done, and that's it. So, you know, I go back to the insight of all of the stakeholders, not just the candidate, you know, and one of the big things that I would implore everybody to really think about is when you're reimagining, redesigning, re-engineering, or just refining the candidate experience, when's the last time you went to the hiring managers, the ones that let you down and cause you all the pain, and ask them, how can we reimagine the candidate experience to better serve you? Now, regardless of what they say next, you'd be crazy not to listen and reflect some change that shows empathy and compassion for their busy life, because now they're going to be bought in a lot more. And the recruiter at the sharp end, who is going to get it in the neck if anything goes wrong, you know, their life is stressful enough. And, you know, so how do we empathy map what their world looks like and create a candidate experience that isn't just magical and certainly isn't just white glove if it creates a ton of extra work or an impossible mountain to climb on a daily basis for the people in your lean team who are trying to weave miracles for the organization, which is more or less always the case.
Yeah, and lean team is being nice. Okay, so that is the perfect segue into the actual 7-step process of the how do you elevate your entire candidate experience. And you already touched on, you got to understand your personas, you got to empathy map, you got to really kind of understand all the different touch points and say, how do we change people from what they're probably experiencing in each given moment to what we want them to experience in any given moment. And by the way, if you are Pinterest, you probably want them to feel comforted and supported. And if you're Goldman Sachs, you probably want them to feel a little bit nervous that this is the hardest interview they're about to enter. They don't have to be the same. So just kind of making sure we're crystal clear that your candidate experience doesn't have to be anything like the other candidate experience, because it is in fact a brand experience. Say it with me yet again. So step 2 is mapping the feel, think, ease memory model, which just flows off the tongue, sir. It's like butter, like
Beautiful.
butter.
Beautiful.
So tell me, what is this thing?
Yeah, so this is essentially we're journey mapping now. We're walking through every step to really interrogate. And we talk about how you make people feel. People feel 6 times faster than they think.
Hmm.
Often that correlates with what they then take away and remember as well. But you alluded to it. It's a really good example. It's not always a positive emotion that's going to serve you the best, actually. Like, let's just take Amazon or an organization with a potentially hostile environment, or, it might be highly competitive, or, whatever it is. It might be appropriate during the interview phases, whether it's one or more, to put people under pressure to see how they react and to give them a little preview of the reality of how it feels to be asked for something which is high quality in a short space of time. So maybe that's appropriate, maybe it isn't. But the feeling bit isn't just positive, nice, happy, joy. It's what's the most appropriate way we want candidates to feel at this moment. And what do we want them to think about that? It might be we want them to feel stress, and we want them to think this is how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And that's how those two things go together. But then, what's the ease level? Are we making it difficult because we want them to demonstrate a capability, or to show some sort of resilience or endurance or, commitment? Or actually, is it just a pain in the arse where technology, if it was better, would remove a frustration or an irritation?
Yeah.
So how easy is it? Like, what's the friction? And then if you add all of that up, what do they walk away remembering from that moment in time?
Yeah.
Is it achievement because even though they were stressed, they knew it was a test, and we made it easy for them to demonstrate their best ability? Therefore, wow.
Yeah.
I remember they are so intentional and they are so switched on about their candidate experience. This is impressive. Notice impressive, not joyous, positive, happy. That's not what we're talking about, to your point. It's got to be on brand, and it should be intentional. So mapping those aspects along the way and then looking at what's in between it's just definitely the place to start. And then once you've done that, the next thing is, if you're really serious about your candidate experience and you want this to be a standard that everybody who touches it and everybody who is behind the scenes supporting it and everybody who you want to be an infrequent ambassador or somebody who might have to touch it at some point, consider bringing it to life with a simple storyboard and a simple service level agreement of this is how we do this now. Mm-hmm. So you can hold people to standards, but also make it really obvious this is what we mean. There's nothing worse than going through all of this pain, having really great intentions, but not being clear on how you want all of the different actors to turn up and make the scene.
Yeah. Some new scheduler shows up and kind of messes the whole thing up because they don't realize what the expectation is. And they may be the smallest cog in the machine, but wow, they can play an outsized role in living up to or killing that brand experience.
Exactly. Airbnb famously brought in Pixar to map their customer journey. And they literally brought it to life with visual representation of every moment, which reflected how they wanted their customer to feel, what the thought was, how easy is it, what's the memorable moment, but also from a stakeholder perspective, like where's the standard, where's the bar that you must live up to, what's the service level agreement for all the people involved, and that's definitely something that we can learn from, and it doesn't have to be Pixar level illustration and all the rest of it. But what I've found over the years is if you go to the lengths of visualizing or mapping something out and saying, this is the standard, and now it has your logo on it somewhere and it's like an official document. Wow, you're serious. This is important to the business. Now it's part of your onboarding. People joining the organization don't know anything different. Like, this is how we do things now. So going from the journey mapping and bringing it to life with a simple storyboard or written narrative or something that makes it official, I really, really recommend those steps. It's, it's made such a difference in many organizations.
Speaking of a smooth experience, this is the spot where I suggest you subscribe to the People MBA, either on YouTube or your podcast player. All downloads are available at peoplemba.com. If you're getting something useful out of it, tell someone. They might even thank you.
It was a very smooth segue going from 2 to 3. I love that. I want to add something we don't talk about much very often, and that is how memories are made, how impressions are made. And there's a lot of really interesting research around it about its recency bias, or it's not recent. What's the first one? Like the first touch and last touch is usually the rule of thumb. That's the part you remember. If you're going to a nice restaurant, do you remember the third course? Maybe, but do you remember that the maitre d' or the host knew your name and had a table ready and asked you a funny question and was incredibly personable? And that last piece of food and the bill and the scraping of the crumbs and all that, those two are the things you remember, the first and last thing. So if you're trying to storyboard these processes, you've got to remember they won't remember the interview, but they remember walking in the door and they remember the last thing you say a lot. And in fact, those two things outsized influence on how they remember it. So if you nail some of those things, if you think about first touch, last touch, and how each one of them matters, it doesn't take much to intentionally define those changes in perception and in memory.
Absolutely. And those things might be tiny little things, but make huge impact and big ripples in terms of what people take away from that experience. Those are the things that need to be really clearly articulated and elevated and made super clear. Hey, this is what we're going to hang our hat on. Everybody needs to rally around. This needs to be done. Yeah. What's beautiful about that straight away is you can start to reward it, recognize it, celebrate it, demonstrate the impact it makes. Like it can become part of the culture that people really get behind very quickly.
All right, moving on to step 4, leveraging storytelling to inspire and engage. What's that about? Is storytelling a thing that you kind of think about a lot? I don't know, just guessing.
Yeah, it's a little sort of geeky passion of mine, as you know, but saying something, telling somebody the facts, is useful, but telling a story makes it more human and it creates an emotional connection. It's also a lot easier to convey maybe a lot of information, but within a story, it's much more memorable, relatable, and personable. Obviously, if you have employees giving advice or painting a picture or being really clear and candid about something, the authenticity, the believability, it seems real and brings the brand to life far more effectively than any manual, handbook, playbook, sign, letter, email, you name it. So investing in the storytelling aspect can make a phenomenal difference. And, once you've done this, you use it so many times, the return on investment is just so high. I'll give you a really good example of my favorite story structure to use during a candidate experience. And I have many story structures in my head, but the one that springs to mind that I've seen used to great effect many, many times is feel, felt, found. Because if you know that a candidate has some sort of reservation, some sort of hesitancy, something they're having difficulty believing or getting their head around, if they can hear it from an employee who's maybe sat in that seat, they are in that team right now, they've been where you are, and now they're on the other side of it, it's a phenomenal way to demonstrate social proof with the power of story. And feel, felt, found is, I know how you feel, I felt the same way, but what I found on the other side was, and then they give you the reality. And what that does is it takes your current reality, your present time, and it matches with their past. And then it magically accelerates them into the future and reassures them that their fear is not something they need to be worried about. And it works phenomenally well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, honestly, that works so well that's the sort of trick that sometimes like used car dealers will use. They say, hey, I know you're a little nervous about buying this car. I was in that way. But what I found was it's just such a natural way of getting people over the hump to get them to change their perception of things. It's incredibly powerful. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So while we have a story, how do we get it in the career site? And more importantly, I think we should spend a few minutes just talking about the power of a career site. Where in the hierarchy of the conversation, the branding, the candidate experience, where does the website live? And I know that you have a slightly vested interest in hearing about career sites, and we're going to own that bias. I'm there to kind of push back if I hear anything that sounds like, I don't know, a sales pitch or anything. And so nothing to worry there, but you think about career sites a lot. So where do they live and how we should approach them in terms of, is it just a billboard? Is it just a thing you pass on the way to something else? And forgive the stupid question, but I've had this asked to me. Do we even need a career site? I know it's crazy. I almost made him spit out. Can you believe that? That would have been live. That would have been great. That's the social clip right there. So, Brian, where do career sites fit in? Why do they matter? How do they all fit?
So I guess the first thing is, on average, a career site will deliver 10% of your branded online traffic to real estate.
Yeah.
And if you advertise a number of roles, you're going to drive a lot of eyeballs to your brand and bring them to wherever you decide you want to bring them to. It could just be a job board, and it could be tactically, mechanically, a means of collecting data. But I think it's safe to say that, we've already talked about it's not candidate experience, it's brand experience. Just on a very basic hygiene level, what do you want your brand experience to be? Do you want to start that new relationship with frustration, anger?
Or worse, give me your information. Give me the information. I'll apply for the job. Give me.
A candidate will spend up to 6 to 8 hours researching your organization before touching something that you own, as in like your digital real estate. Mm-hmm. They're looking for what's the truth and all the rest of it. As soon as they step foot onto your domain, you have the ability to control or heavily influence. You can never control fully, but heavily influence the narrative. Yeah. And how you present the jobs, the vacancies, is an immediate indicator of how much you prioritize and value the people inside the organization compared to maybe the shiny shop window of when you're selling products or services or, so on and so forth. So from a brand equity perspective and just brand perception point of view, I think there's a great argument to at least be presentable. But even when you bring people to a career site, our data for years now has shown people aren't necessarily willing, ready, and able to just immediately go to guns and apply for a role. Yeah. Typically they want to be convinced and romanced a little bit. They've still got some questions of, you've got their attention, but have you built affinity? So this is your shop window. This is your time to shine. This is your ability to demonstrate some continuity between some of the reviews they might have read, demonstrate the social proof of if it is a referral or something that's caught their eye on a billboard or whatever. Demonstrate like, this is who we are. This is what we stand for. This is how it feels. This is what to expect. Answer some of those questions and draw people in, and all of the research has shown, in fact, one remarkable stat is if you have a video of your hiring manager on a job description, conversion can go up by up to 40%.
That's crazy.
On average, it's 23%, but we've seen spikes of, So by visually engaging your audience and humanizing the experience on some level, then, the difference can be remarkable. We've recently been testing quick apply versus having to create an account and put in all your details and I don't know about you, I am literally allergic to forms. I will I will go the long way round the world if it means I can sidestep filling in a short, But the difference is so crazy that, like, the evidence is clear. You have to consider irritation, frustration, and the convenience and efficiency for your candidates these days, because they're up against one-click buy on Amazon, the intuition of Alexa Plus listening to you whether you like it or not and putting things, you know what I mean? It's like we're in a world of efficiency and convenience. You have to at least live up to that. So a decent careers website environment where you can showcase your employer brand as it's supposed to be, for me, is hygiene.
Yeah. And let's not forget, if you kind of mentally map out all the different platforms you use to kind of project your employer brand and promote your employer brand, your career site is the only one where you have 100% control of what it is, what it says, what it looks like, all of that. Go ahead and go to LinkedIn and say, can we make the color green, please? Mm-hmm. Have fun. See how that plays out. If that's your branded color, that's good for you, but you're on somebody else's platform and they make the rules. How many photos can you put? What size photos? How much content can you put? Can you put a video? Can you not put a video? That's, you're living by their rules. Your career site is rules you get to make up, and you get to decide, what do I want to be telling? How do I want to influence? Because that's the place where you have maximum control over that content. Mm-hmm. It is kind of balanced with the sense that you're right. Only 10% of your potential eyeballs are ever going to hit your career site. But I'm also going to guess a lot of the 90% who didn't go up, they were people who just click a quick apply and got the heck out of Dodge. They weren't doing the research. They were not as invested. Mm-hmm. And we all know people who do the research, who do the investing, who really kind of look around. They are almost always better candidates and better hires. So amplify and optimize around the 10% who want to learn about you before they click apply, and not the 90% who are like, if we could make it, think of the easy button. It's like, hit the button. Those people, you don't need to optimize for them. They're already out there doing stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. But let's look at it in financial terms. There's a lot of organizations that spend multiple millions of dollars every year in recruitment marketing and programmatic and Google AdWords and the like, not to mention sort of live events and all the rest of it, driving people intentionally to a career site. Sure. Now, that's like in e-commerce, that's like the product page where the buy button lives. And that is the sharp end of this entire attribution model of the top of the funnel right the way down to the bottom. From a basic conversion perspective, the evidence is clear. It's not an argument anymore. The more you can showcase your employer brand, and the more you can present an environment which answers the questions on your mind and eases the worries and concerns and issues and sets expectations and has the information required to make a career decision. It's not, we're not talking about buying candy bars at the supermarket here. We're talking about a career decision. Yeah. How much is the cost of a vacant seat? I mean, we go down the rabbit hole of so many metrics that is hanging in the balance based on the impression that you create when a candidate visits whatever page you decide deem important enough to put in front of them. It has to be conversion worthy, so I would say take a look at your investment in your marketing dollars, and you could actually reduce that. Not that anyone would, but you could reduce it if you increase the conversion capability of where you take in the traffic.
Exactly. You just need to spend less money on ads if more people are buying anyway. So totally great. All right. So once we've got the career site, we've done all the mapping and we know the journey and we're put together, how do we validate that we're doing it right? And then what is the iteration process from there?
Yeah. So it's not one and done. It's not one and done. And I think just basic sort of NPS surveys and making sure that this is something that's being managed and maintained regularly is just best practice. If you're going to invest in this and sort of reimagine it, it needs to be, what gets measured gets managed. Easy for me to say. So it's as simple as that. And once you get the basic hygiene, it's the sort of do no wrong, live up to brand standards, and all the sort of basic stuff we've talked about. Beyond there, the levels of sophistication and refinement are endless. For example, do you think everybody that applies for a job at your organization should have the same candidate experience? Probably a sort of C-suite level leader should probably have a slightly different candidate experience to a call center exec, or somebody in finance versus sales, and so on and so forth. So this is where we can now start to personalize the experience, save up content that's relevant to them, that answers their questions and speaks to them at the level that they're at. Maybe you skip a few steps if it's appropriate, or so personalize the experience, map an experience out that's relevant for the different personas, and then measure each one, and iterate as you go. It's not rocket science, this, James. It really is just intentionally mapping out what looks great, segmenting to a degree that makes sense according to time and budget, probably, and then monitoring and iterating as you go to improve the metrics that you've decided upon.
Yeah. So we're going to skip the last step, which is scaling excellence, which you can read on the download over at peoplemba.com. Obviously, thank you, Plum, for sponsoring this week. We're running a little long here, so I want to kind of jump ahead a bit to. We have also a whole lot of lists of things beyond the obvious, things beyond the basics. Is there one of those things you could pull out and say, maybe this is a surprising way or a surprising channel or a surprising opportunity to think about your candidate experience living here?
Yeah, so I go back to the sort of, you've mapped out the branded the branded experience. Think about, where do you have drop-off, or where do candidates ghost you, or where do they give you feedback where they're most terrified, scared, confused, whatever. And think about, how can you create a moment of magic to fill those gaps?
What are some examples of moments of magic? Because it's a phrase you've used a couple of times. I have a sense of what some of those things could be, but I bet you've got a good mental list of things that you've seen or work magic, not to use that word too much.
Yeah. So the favorite example that comes to mind, I was working with Graham Johnson when he was at Virgin. He's now at Mail and Entertainment. That was nearly 10 years ago. We mapped their candidate experience. We took it from negative to positive, but we wanted to go beyond just good candidate experience. And actually, the mantra that Graham put out there was, we want candidates to be a better version of themselves, having had the experience of applying for a job with us.
Wow. Yeah, that's a gorgeous high bar. And that's one of those things where even if you don't meet it, having the bar and setting it that high puts you light years ahead of so many people.
Oh, absolutely. So at the time, Usain Bolt was the brand ambassador. And we managed to get a few hours. He was being filmed in the Caribbean for the marketing department. And the marketing department played ball. And I remember writing little scripts for Usain Bolt. And lo and behold, the next day, these videos came back. And it was Usain Bolt giving advice on how to prepare for a big event, talking about it's all about preparation. It was phenomenal. So now we sent that video to people the night before an interview.
That's glorious.
And a little moment of magic they were not expecting, but Usain Bolt sending them a message about, don't worry, you've got this, but be prepared, be confident, get a good night's sleep. We'll see you in the morning, be at your best. It's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
So you can't always afford or get your hands on somebody like Usain Bolt to do that. But actually, if you replace that with the hiring manager you're going to talk to, or you replace it with the CEO, and even if it is the same video or whatever, maybe there's a few different iterations of something that they are not expecting that gives them a message which speaks directly to how they're feeling right now, demonstrates empathy and compassion and intentionality that goes above and beyond from my perspective. And you can deliver magic, but if it's unexpected, that's something that they will remember and tell their friends about. And maybe the next day they will feel like this is the place for me. I do feel a little bit more confident. I am put at ease, so maybe there's a utility in that as well as just the feelings you get at the time.
Yeah. And I think the unexpected is the way to put it, because I think everybody knows what a candidate experience is going to end up looking like. It's, it's a slog, it's a gauntlet. I had a hiring manager tell me this is going to be a gauntlet of a job interview. And I was like, well, didn't you say the quiet part loud? But to do something unusual says that we know you, we see you, we care about you, we want you to succeed, we want you to do your best. I love things like sending the interview questions in advance. I think that should be a more standard thing, because it says we don't want to trick you, we want you to show us your best. And I think just the action of trying says almost as much, if not as much, as the thing that you've done itself. Just showing, trying, putting that out there is everything. And you're right. You don't need Usain Bolt to kind of do this. You don't need a highly paid Olympian to do all this stuff. It just show that you get what's going on, and it does amazing things.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's a good wrap up. So if you want to read the entire 7-step journey a little more in depth with a couple of maps to kind of check out, as well as I'm guessing 10 or 12 kind of beyond the basics ideas you should be stealing, go check out the download over at peoplemba.com. Sponsored this week by Plum. Thanks so much for the sponsorship, Plum. We're going to close here, but remember, leave us a voicemail. Just go to peoplemba.com to click the voicemail tab and leave us a question, leave us a comment. Go to YouTube. Subscribe to us on podcasts. Say nice things about us if it's useful. I've seen a lot of commentary on LinkedIn, which is really nice. I would love it to kind of get, out in the world so people see that stuff. Let people know. So we're here to help you get your seat at the table. Candidate experience is just yet another piece of the puzzle, ensuring that the people you're bringing in are the right people, that they have the right experience, and it shows you're strategic, you're thoughtful, you're considerate, you're not just going through the motions, and that's the stuff leadership will see and eventually reward. So Brian, as always, thanks so much for a great conversation, and we'll see everybody next week.
See you next week.
So how was your experience? Exactly. Make sure to check out this week's downloadable guide on candidate experience. It's a scorcher. Anyway, if this has inspired you or helped you see new ways of getting things done, tell a friend about the podcast or point them to peoplemba.com. Later, Tater.